Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. The number one video that we shoot every single year is how much can a landlord raise the rent? Now, if you've watched our prior videos, you know that this is going to change every April. And why is that? Now, back in 2019, the state of California passed AB 1482. Now, I say this every time, but I have to remind everyone, all of California has rent control. Now, why do I say that? I work in the real estate industry and I talk to real estate brokers, appraisers, investors, and I'm shocked that real estate brokers do not know that all of California is subject to rent control. Because oftentimes I'll list a property and someone will call and say, now is that rent controlled? And my jaw drops. I'm like, every place is rent controlled, no matter where you are. No place in Orange County, San Diego County is protected from this. We have rent control everywhere. So how does rent control work and how did they want us to use this law? So when they passed AB 1482, there were a couple exemptions. So very important. I get a lot of questions. People call me and they'll say, hey Juan, I've watched your video, but can you tell me how much can I raise the rent? So before anyone reaches out to us with questions, and we get asked a lot of questions, I'm gonna cover everything today. So a couple things, exemptions. Not every property is subject to rent control, okay? This means that you don't have to play by the rules that the lawmakers have made for us. So who's exempt? Here's just a handful of examples. If you have a single family home, a condominium, you do not have to worry about rent control. So does that mean that you could raise the rent by as much as you want? Pretty much, that's what that means. Now, typically I would tell you, figure out what similar properties rent for. The market will only pay what the market wants to pay. And so that's going to be a certain driver. So condo, single family homes, you're protected for now. The law could change in the future and in the near future, but for now, you're fine. Now, if you own a duplex and you live in one of the duplexes, guess what? That next unit behind you or in front of you, not subject to rent control. So before you reach out to us and say, hey, I own a duplex, I'm gonna ask you, do you live inside of it? And you say, yes, we live there with my family, and in the back, I rent it out. That is not subject to rent control. So there are gonna be a few exemptions. If you build something that's within the last 15 years is considered new construction, you don't have to worry about the rent control. You don't have to play by the rules of rent control. So those are some of the most obvious ones that are exempt. And so make sure to watch this video in its entirety. You do not have to worry about rent control. Now, who is subject to rent control? Now, before I even get to that topic, before the 2019 statewide rent control, there was a lot of cities, like 15 cities in all of California, that already had implemented their own rent control. Santa Monica being one of them, LA City, San Francisco, and there's several others throughout that had their own rent control. That is citywide rent control that was implemented before 2019. Their requirements are different than the statewide requirements. They're a lot more strict. What they're allowed to do and not allowed to do are going to be much different. So a lot of this video will be paying attention to the 2019 AB 1482 laws, which Long Beach is part of that. That's the market that we serve the most. And so a lot of my message will be specific to that. But if you're outside of our area and you're curious, how does this impact where you are? Not to worry, I'm gonna send you and give you guys the links exactly to where you need to go to get that information. So when the law was passed, the lawmakers said that under AB 1482, you could raise the rent 5% plus CPI, the Consumer Price Index. That is what they consider inflation for the basket of goods. We're talking about utilities, food, gas, the cost of living. Now, we just got through our COVID period and we know that inflation was through the roof, okay? And so inflation is something that's closely monitored and watched. In fact, it's monitored on a monthly basis. So if anyone's watching this, there is a CPI index, there's a number, and it's provided by the Labor Bureau Statistics. I'll put the link on our site here. And you could see that you could go back to January and there's going to be a CPI for that month. And it keeps going. The way the law was written is that they want us to use the CPI for the month of April And now they don't release the CPI in April because they don't know exactly what that number is going to be. But it got released recently. It got released today. It's May 10th of 2023. So now we know that it's 5% plus CPI, not to exceed 10%. I know there's a lot of confusion behind this because when we sell our apartment buildings, new investors come and they say, okay, now talk to me, is it rent controlled? So they don't know that we have statewide rent control. That's the first problem. Then some people say, well, I'm only allowed to raise the rent by 3%, correct? Not correct. Sometimes they'll say, now I'm limited with a max of 5%, right? And that's not correct. Again, it's very important that we know that it's 5% plus CPI. So with that being said, CPI was just released today at 3.8%. So again, it's 5% plus 3.8%, bringing you to a maximum rent that you could increase in 2023 through 2024, a maximum of 8.8%. Okay, so moving forward, starting August 1st of 2023, if you're a landlord, if you're looking to do the legal allowable rent increase, that's going to be 8.8%. If you've been watching our videos, you know that last year and currently the allowable is 10%. Why is it that we went down? It's a good question. The reason why we were allowed to go a little higher last year was because inflation was through an all-time high. Now, inflation was so high that we actually met the limit, the 10% limit. So 11 months had passed and we were allowed to raise rents by 10%. A lot of owners did take advantage of that. Some owners didn't know anything about this law and so nothing was done. Some owners don't know anything about the law and they raise the rents incorrectly, sometimes more than they should. And the reason I know is because we get a lot of inquiries that come in. So moving forward, you could raise the rents 8.8%. Currently, we're getting out of the period that allowed 10%, okay? So what should a tenant do if you're in this situation? Well, hopefully you've watched this video. I do encourage you to go to the Labor Bureau statistics. Again, we'll put the link in the video. If you're not in the LA area, because that's where we are arriving at the 3.8% for CPI, there are 26 metropolitan bureaus that are going to come up with individual CPIs. I know it's a lot of information, but this is the way the law was written. So you need to find out what area are you in the state of California, what is the CPI for April in that area, and then you add that plus for the 5%. I would imagine that the CPI is going to be pretty similar across the board. But again, here in LA, Anaheim, Glendale area, you're going to be at 3.8 CPI. Maximum is 8.8%. A few of the questions that I get is, hey Juan, I don't want to raise my rent by 8.8%. There's no minimum. If you do not want to raise your rent as a landlord, you don't need to, okay? That is on a case-by-case basis, however your building's performing. And so there's no minimum, but there is a maximum. The maximum, again, 8.8%. Minimum, you could do 1%, 2%, 3%, all the way up until you feel that it's right. Now, how long is that allowed for? Starting August 1st of 2023, if you raise it by 8.8%, you cannot raise it again for another 12 months. Why does this matter? A lot of investors that we're representing, when they are looking to purchase a building, hopefully they're working with someone like us, a real estate professional that specializes in multifamily. The question that needs to be asked by new investors is, when was the last time they raised the rent? Critically good question. Why? Because we want to know if we're looking at this building, maybe we need to generate more income, not because we're trying to make more money, but we're simply trying to cover the mortgage with the higher interest rates, okay? But if the landlord, the current landlord has already raised the maximum rent, you may not be able to raise it until another 12 months. So super important that if you're a landlord, that I believe it's important that you're keeping up with the rents, because it will impact the value when we're looking to sell. But also if you're a new investor or a savvy investor, you want to know when the last increases were done on that property. If you're a tenant, there might be an instance where your landlord raises it more than it's allowed, okay? I'm not saying use this video to talk to them, but I want you to know your rights, because these rights apply to both tenants and landlords. And so I think if everyone's in compliance, it shouldn't be an issue. Some of you have reached out to me in the past with like, my landlord has raised my rent by 20%, which is super high. Can they do that? The question that I'm gonna ask you before you ask me again is, what do you live in? If you live in a place that's a single family home that might be under the exemption clause, the landlord could kind of do whatever they want. There's no protection for you there. Again, not my rule, I'm not the one who creates this, but I am delivering the message. And so there's some instances where a landlord is not subject to any type of control, and that's just the way that the law is at this moment. For those of you watching this and you might be in LA City, disregard what I've said, because LA City is one of those cities that had rent control before the statewide was announced. And so they have other restrictions in LA, one of which they cannot raise the rent through January of 2024. So if you're in LA City, they're playing under a complete set of rules that's outside of what I'm reporting on today. Here's my advice for the tenants out there. And I'm gonna tell you this, from this point moving forward, rents will never stop going up in Southern California. I know that we're hearing news that rents are coming down. They're not really coming down significantly. They're still expensive. So if you're a tenant, what's gonna happen is you're in a position where moving forward, rents will always go up in your case. You might have a landlord that does not raise your rent because maybe he doesn't want to, doesn't need to, maybe he's making plenty of money, but at some point that property is gonna be sold and there's a new owner that comes in and they're gonna want to raise the rent. Why? Not because they're bad, because they're looking at this as a business and they need to increase the income to cover the new expense. That's why they're doing it in most cases. So if you're a tenant, and this is the same message I gave last year, do what you can to try to become a homeowner, a condo owner. Buy your first multifamily. Why? Because once you're able to, and I'm not saying it's easy, I'm not saying it's not a sacrifice, I'm not saying that it's for everybody, but this is a way that you're gonna cap your biggest expense. If you're fortunate enough to take action in buying your first home or condo or your first investment, that interest rate does not change. It's a 30-year mortgage, meaning that where a tenant's rent is gonna go up forever, the person who was fortunate enough to be in a position to be able to buy a property, their expense is gonna be capped for the next 30 years. What position would you rather be in, okay? Again, I'm not saying it's easy, but if you want to learn some of the basic steps on getting started, please reach out to us, because that is where you could take control. Because I'm gonna continue doing these videos year after year, notifying you on the new increase in rents. If you're an owner, we have to make sure that we know our rights. We can no longer say, well, I'm an owner and they keep passing laws and I'm not aware of them. If you're an owner, you gotta be a responsible owner. You gotta play by the rules. You guys decide if you wanna go to the maximum 8.8%. If you're thinking about selling, I'm gonna tell you, it's gonna benefit you to make sure that your rents are at market. The market has been slowing down. Sales are significantly down from where we were last year. And what makes the biggest difference? What properties are selling quicker are the ones that the rents are at market. Because ultimately, when you have an apartment building, what you're selling is the income stream of that apartment building, not so much the building, okay? So for that reason, if you're someone watching this video and you're an owner, have a conversation with our team. Let's discuss your options. If you're planning on selling, let's strategize on, and even if you're planning on selling 5 years from now, let's have a plan in place, because ultimately your goal is to sell at the very top. I know that's your goal because I talk to sellers every day. And so again, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. Make sure you check out the BLS, Labor Bureau Statistics. That's where you're gonna get a lot of your information. I wanna thank them for their information. That's all for now. So there you have it. How much can a landlord legally raise the rent 2023 through 2024? And that's, again, 8.8%. That's the maximum and no more. Again, there's no minimum. So If you're someone looking to get started, if you're looking to maybe see if you qualify, maybe you're tired of this rental increases, please reach out to us. We do own Sage Trust Mortgage. We could get you pre-approved. And I tell you what, it doesn't cost you a dime, not a dollar, to find out whether you get approved for a loan or not. So I strongly recommend. If you're an owner, please reach out to us. There comes a time where you may be wanting to sell and you want to make sure that you have everything in line and you thought of everything before we put your property on the market to make sure that we maximize that value. If you're out of our area, we have nationwide affiliates. So please, whether it's Georgia, Illinois, Texas, Arizona, reach out to us. It's important that if you're looking to build wealth through apartment ownership, that you're working with someone who's not a traditional realtor, but someone who specializes in multifamily and investments. So reach out. I want to make that connection to make sure that you're taken care of. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And that's all for now.